ring, read about bitty bling bling. Every time I buy a new ride bling.
Today, I'm gonna go over my suspension. What I think is the ultimate grassroots S13 setup. Z32 brakes probably doesn't really matter that much, but obviously BC Racing coilovers. And then as far as angle goes, we got Heatmaker B-knuckle, stock outer tie rod, stock inner tie rod, and then a 15mm slip-on spacer. Factory S14 lower control arm. So as you can see right here, maybe you can't, this is extended. It's only extended because it's a S13 lower control arm. So S14 control arms are 15mm longer than S13. There's a difference in like the ball joint shank and the knuckle shank, I'm pretty sure, so that's why I chose to just stick with that extended S13 lower control arm. As you can see, I have plenty of angle. Something that makes that possible is the PBM high clearance tension rod and the GK Tech high clearance sway bar. Without those, you would probably lose 10 or 15 degrees of angle, if I had to guess. I have a comparison on my Instagram, like way back, where I did a comparison to the factory sway bar, or sticky sway bar versus the GK Tech sway bar, and I actually picked up probably 10 degrees of angle. I have no over-centering issues. I've had the same rack in the car for 3 years. I've honestly only ever changed tie rods because that inner ends up getting a lot of play in it, but like I said, I buy cheap tie rods. People buy PVMs and they never have issues. So along with the, all this angle kit, blah, 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 power brace. You really want to box these in. These are the tension rod brackets. You want to make sure that those are boxed in. They flex a lot. Same thing with this. You really want to tie this structure in with this power brace. Same thing with the lower control arm. That's something you also want to brace because it's basically a C channel, and we're putting tons of load through these things, so they fold under pressure. That's not good. Another thing that I think people might not know about: your tension rod brackets are bolted to your lower radiator support. Well, these things only have like 2 spot welds here and like 1 there and then 1 down there. What happens is, like I said, there's a ton of load on those tension rod brackets. Well, this will straight up separate. I've seen it on at least 3 or 4 cars, and even my own, where it's separated and I had no idea, but the car felt funny. It took me a while to realize what was going on. But what will happen is that it'll separate, and then you'll constantly be adjusting caster, because your tension rod bracket, your tension rod bolts on your tension rod bracket. This is how you adjust your caster while that's loose. You didn't see me tighten that. Pulling this control arm this way or this way is what adjusts your caster. It's as simple as that. I think a lot of people often overthink this setup, and you get something like FDF or WiseFab, then you got to move the rack, and you got all these other things you got to do, and then parts are less replaceable. You got Heims and stuff like that could go bad. It's not like they go bad quick, but they can, and it's not something that's easily replaceable. I've driven plenty of S chassis, plenty of BMWs, like I've felt WiseFab. I've pretty much driven a car with every type of angle kit, and in my opinion, B-knuckle is like straight up the best as far as steering feel and reliability. So with this, you get a lot of feedback in the wheel based on like where you're turned and how it loads the car up, and it really helps you predict how you want to transition. Based on where I'm at load wise with the steering wheel, I can choose to load the car up more and have it snap harder. I can choose to load the car up less and have it snap less. There's tons that you can do with this setup, whereas I felt with other setups you don't get a lot of feedback. It's the positive to other setups seems to be mostly just getting a shit ton of angle, which is not always everything. Yeah, so go-to, that's the front go-to setup. So we'll move on to the rear, where this gets a little more complicated, but it's all pretty simple once you understand. So let's get started, right? We got, we already said Z32 brakes. Obviously it's 5-lug. You won't really be able to tell looking at it here, but this car has an S14 subframe. So you can't really see, but there's a 350Z diff in there. The only way you can get a 350Z diff into an S chassis is with an S14 subframe. Or GK Tech sells a custom cover that bolts onto the Z diff that allows you to bolt into that 2-bolt on the subframe. That diff cover is like $800. I guess if you add everything up, it'd probably be cheaper to buy the cover versus buying a subframe and conversion, bushings. But there's benefits to the S14 subframe. S14 subframe is better for anti-squat, as well as, you can see this isn't a factory knuckle, this is a PBM knuckle. So when I first got the car, Mike and all the guys on the team were like, you gotta get PBM knuckles. Well, I did, and I've had no issues with them. ISR, adjustable arms. For me, I don't run this thing extended all the way out like most people do. I think most people say to get rid of all your anti-squat, to run this to like 1.5 inches out versus stock. I think I'm somewhere in the middle ground of that. When I had it set up all the way out, the car felt really numb. I'm not sure why that is. I'm not a suspension expert, but I felt like I couldn't predict my like transitions and stuff like that. So I'd imagine that the anti-squat, maybe it took a bunch of side bite out of the car. I'm not sure. Another thing with the S14 subframe is you can see there's a washer in there. Let me see if you can see that. So there's a washer right here. Well, the width of this lower control arm where it mounts is smaller than the S14 control arm. So I had to space that. What you can do is just get an S14 control arm, bolt that boy right on there. Maybe there's some issues with the ball joint pitch, I'm not sure, but yeah, S14 subframe, Z diff, Z axles. These Z axles bolt right in. They go right into the hub, no problems. These axles and diff, from what I remember looking up, they're good for 600 horsepower. What grassroots guy is gonna run more than 600 horsepower? If you run more than 600 horsepower in a grassroots level, you're just wasting money. I think this setup is also good if you decide you wanna go to competitions and you wanna put more grip in the car. Say you got 500 horsepower, you wanna throw a ton of grip in the car, you can go compete. It's really good for everything. Whereas like, even when I had 300 horsepower on a factory diff and factory axles, I definitely blew a few axles up. Anytime I tried to put like a little bit of grip in the car or I had a heavy clutch kick, I would blow an axle. But with this setup, same scenarios, more horsepower, never had an issue. As far as alignment goes, I run about a 1/2 inch of toe in the rear. I calculated the sweep, the compression, how much it toes out under compression. If I remember right, it was like 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. So really I end up having a 1/4 inch of toe in under full compression, which I like. I could take some of that out and then it would get rid of some of that like dive in that I have, but I really like to be able to transition and dive in hard. Front alignment specs, I have 7.5 degrees of caster in the front and I run a 1/4 inch toe out. I've always run a 1/4 out. I've never noticed the difference between an 1/8 and a 1/4. Some people do, I don't. Yeah, I think that's really it, man. I'm gonna try to go to 7 degrees of caster this year and see if I like it better. But I mean, it's as simple as that. Spend the money, get this stuff under your car and like never touch it again. Hopefully you guys enjoy that and maybe it'll help some of you decide what you're gonna do suspension wise. If you have any questions about any of it, obviously feel free to hit me up. If you watch this video on YouTube, comment, I guess, and I'll try to get back to you. Or if you want a quicker response, definitely hit me up on Instagram.